Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. We're just getting a few audio gremlins ironed out, so I'm hoping at least you can hear me and see my screen. But let me just check if I could just get anyone who's listening just to pop in the chat. They can hear me and they can see the Big SCOM Survey, the results. Fingers crossed. We've been battling for the last 15, 20 minutes with issues of this nature. So if somebody could confirm, that would be excellent. Can hear you and see UK. Amazing. Right, good. So the show must go on. So we're going to start regardless of the issues. At the moment, there's just two of the four of us here, and we'll just have to see how we go. Thank you everybody for joining today, where we're taking great pleasure in unveiling the Big SCOM Survey results, which we've been collecting over the course of this year. It's been a great year for SCOM. We've got some really interesting results to share with you. So this is the point where I'd normally introduce my panel and get them to introduce themselves. But as you can see, this is going to be a bit slim. I'll introduce myself. So I'm Bruce. I'm Director of Products here at Squared Up, also a founding member of Cookdown. And you'll probably be quite familiar with who I am. So that's positive. I also, hopefully at some point soon, will be joined by Stoyan, who is battling with technical gremlins as we speak.
Hello, guys.
Stoyan, hello. Hopefully you can hear us and see the screen now.
Yes.
Perfect. Good. I was just introducing you, so you're bang on time. It's like you knew I was doing so. Welcome. It's great to have you here with us today. Would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Stoyan. I'm working for a Swiss consulting company. It's called Pwn IT Consulting. I do SCOM for many years in a row now. I'm also Microsoft MVP. Mainly because of SCOM, and thank you guys for having me today on the panel.
It's great to have you with us. Glad you can speak and hear us. This is exciting. Next up, we have Christian. Christian, you work at NICE. Would you like to introduce yourself, Christian?
Yes. Hello. I hope you can hear me. You're never sure of that.
It's muffled, but we can.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, my name is Christian Heidkamp. I'm a product manager at NICE, and well, I'm doing SCOM since, as far as I can remember, at least 15 years. So happy to be on the panel today and looking forward to it.
Very cool. Good to have you with us once more. And we have a new addition to the panel this year. So Nurul, I'd like to introduce you to the stage. You work with me at Squared Up. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, I'm Nurul. I've been in Squared Up for over a year now, and in SCOM I've been working as a SCOM admin previously with over 6 years of experience. Thank you, Bruce, for giving me an opportunity to be a panelist here. It's great to be here.
All good. You have a different type of experience from everyone else in this panel, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say as far as insights are concerned. Should be good, and it's great to have you with us today. Let's get into it then. So what is the Big SCOM Survey? This year we asked 15 questions. There was some internal debate around whether it was 15 or 19 questions, because there's a few that depending on what you answer, you get more questions. But 15 questions. We collect all of the answers anonymously, which is important because we're hoping that you'll answer sort of honestly and truthfully. This isn't meant to be a sales thing. This is meant to be a true pulse check for what you guys are actually doing with SCOM and what your plans are for SCOM over time, so we can see trends and changes over time, as things obviously are going to evolve over time in the area of SCOM. And the first thing to kind of start with is the number of submissions. So we've been doing this now for 4 years. We started off in 2020 where we had 118 submissions, and in 2021 we had a dip. But back up a little bit in 2022. But this year, for whatever reason, we got almost double last year, which is amazing news. So thank you very much for all submitting the survey. Hopefully you'll enjoy seeing the results. I think this is a bit of fuzzy logic as to why we have more submissions. We simplified the questions, which should help. We made the questions more multiple choice and less text box type stuff. It's easier to crunch the results from my perspective, as it's me that does all the analysis for these things, but also makes it quicker and easier for you guys to submit. And the only other thing we did differently was launch the Big SCOM Survey at SCOMathon, which is our annual mid-year kind of event, virtual event. rather than doing it more, quietly, essentially. So, I mean, if there is another reason I'm unaware of, I'd love to hear it. Maybe my panel have a view. I'll just give them a chance to speak and see if they do have a view before I move on. But it's great to see either way. Lots and lots of submissions. All right. So the very first question we asked them was, pick the job title that most closely aligns with yours. Now, in past years, this was a text box, so I had to sanitize the data. We had all sorts of stuff submitted. But this year, it was multiple choice with an option of other. But there's a few interesting points for me. The first one is more people are saying that their job title, not job, like role, responsibility, is for the first time primarily SCOM administrator, which is really interesting, seeing a trend away from more general job titles like infrastructure engineer or monitoring engineer. So specifically SCOM in a job title, which is great to see, more people treating SCOM with the care and attention it sort of needs. But the other really interesting thing for me personally is, for the very first time, we see people who identify as something to do with DevOps or SRE for the very first time, which is very, very cool. Panel, any thoughts on this? Agree, disagree, comments?
Well, yeah.
If I may start. Thank you, guys. I just wanted to say firstly that I'm very pleased to see that the number of responses to the survey has increased, because nevertheless, it's very important for us, not only for Microsoft, but also for us to know what the customer's opinion actually is. And regarding the surprising number of SCOM engineers, also, in my opinion, it's a very positive factor. There are lots of big environments which are requiring dedicated roles for this. So as SCOM administrators would be one. And what is also a very nice surprise for me personally is also the increased number of monitoring engineers, which is also like a separate role on its own.
I would agree. Stoyan, thank you for that. Christian, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Just wonder why you have 2 DevOps engineers here and further down below business analysts again. So, but in the end, obviously, that just makes the number bigger of DevOps engineers. So I think that's really the road forward to look for. So, because just doing this SCOM administration, we're in the world of management packs, and always say management packs is really a development job. So really on the dev side of things. And when we talk to customers and they ask, like, how do we version the management packs, how we make sure we can track back changes we have done, that's all part of involving some DevOps systems like Azure DevOps or something like that, or GitLab, GitHub. So that's really what we encourage everyone to use and going into that direction. So happy to see that number growing.
I agree. Fewer kind of like throwaway management packs, more stuff under source control going through pipelines. It's great to see. Narul, anything to add? Any extra comments?
Nothing much. It's just that it's exciting to see that for the very first time we have DevOps engineers and SREs. So it's I'm like more eager to know that how SCOM adopts to their goals, or how they are using SCOM to monitor their systems as observability tool.
I agree. It makes sense. It's an important part of your tooling landscape if you have on-prem infrastructure, for sure. Moving on then to the next very related question. So there's no real surprises as to the answer based on the job role. What percentage of your role involves SCOM? So 51% of people saying 75% of their time or more. If your primary role is monitoring engineer, or in particular SCOM administrator, that's not really a surprise at all. Sort of very closely related to the next question, what percentage of your role involves monitoring tools / observability tools, including SCOM? So slightly broader. The expectation here is, historically rather, we see more people, I'd say they do more monitoring, less SCOM specific, but you see that if you compare them side by side, there's actually very little difference, which says that the majority of people that filled in the survey, SCOM is their day job, effectively, which is Cool. And I think a first, which is very cool. Nurul, would you like to go first as far as thoughts are concerned? Let's go inverse order this time.
Again, it's based on this. What I infer is that whether or not SCOM they are using as a primary tool or not, but still we see that people use the SCOM along with other tools. So yeah, it shows that how valuable the SCOM is still. Yep.
Indeed. Yeah. Christian, anything to add?
Well, just wonder what they're doing the rest of the time, right? So when they're not doing SCOM and not doing other monitoring tools, is that more like a DevOps role or so? But in the end, I think that's typically what's representative of what we see in our customer base, or when we talk to SCOM customers.
Especially when you're speaking to someone who identifies as a SCOM administrator. Yeah. Stoyan, anything to add?
Just more than 50% are doing 75% or more on SCOM. So this means for me that the data we have within the Big SCOM survey will be very relevant, and let's say, it will show us the true face of the nature of SCOM. I hope so.
I agree. The thing that's sort of interesting for me there is, because this is now the 4th year we've done this, as we get deeper into the results, I've done comparisons between, former years where we've asked the same questions. So it'll be interesting to see whether this, additional, depth of people who identify as SCOM administrators results in different types of results. So we will see. Moving on then to what version of SCOM do you run in production? And this is viewed in percentage form. For me, the most interesting thing here is, look, we have SCOM managed instance in production, which is really cool to see. Clearly, it's the latest and greatest. No people running SCOM 2025 in production, not really that surprising. I saw the announcement blog pop up yesterday. I don't know the exact official date it appeared. We can cover that a bit later, which means as far as the data is concerned, the latest version of SCOM in the wild on-prem is 2022. The other really wild highlight for me is this piece at the top. People on really, really old versions of SCOM, people running SCOM 2007 or older, which is wild. Before I sort of go to the panel, I'm going to sort of break this down a little bit further, because we're looking at this in sort of percentage form at the moment. It's about 3% of people using SCOM managed instance, and I think 2% using a SCOM 2007 and older in production. Wow, still taking time to get over that. Looking at that numerically, so bear in mind we had 175 submissions to the Big SCOM survey in total. If you total up all the entries here for what version of SCOM do you run in production, we have 277 SCOM deployments, which means that on average, 1.6 SCOM deployments per organization, which is interesting. Obviously, that doesn't exactly work in reality. It's an average, but you get what I'm saying, that there are companies that have multiple versions of SCOM in production. It's also interesting seeing what 3% for SCOM actually equates to in numbers. I'm going to pause for air and see if my panel have any thoughts. I'm going to start with Christian this time, as I haven't started with you yet.
So yes, sure. Happy to comment, because I always like these SCOM MI. We were really part of early previews and doing that for many number of years. So in the end, we know customers are doing that. Some are on the journey of doing it. We know some look at the cost a bit. I think we covered that as well. But in that part, I think I'm happy to see that. I'm more worried about the white block, about the 17% here, because that's also what we see quite a lot still. Indeed, there is 2012 R2 out there still for a number of reasons sometimes, but the good news is it still runs, isn't it? So basically, these are basically my comments to that. But it's pretty much when we add 2025 going always also to that version number pretty soon, I guess.
I would expect to see 2025 appearing in prod very soon. I agree. Rule, would you like
what
to
we see? Sorry, one more comment. What we actually quite often see that looking historically at this, customers migrate now faster to new versions. And then there's also always the question, do you side-by-side or in-place upgrade? So, but probably I'm not sure if that was part of the question, how the upgrade mechanism is done. But in summary, also for everyone who's interested, and everybody will go through these upgrade process. This upgrade in place has got a lot better over the last years. That's at least my experience I've seen.
That's good to hear and good to see that reflected in the numbers here. Yeah. Narul, would you like to go next?
I suppose maybe with increase in cloud deployments, over the next years, I expect to see large number of SCOM managed instances people opting for. But yeah, again, on regarding what using SCOM 2007 or older, all I can think is because of some business legacy systems, or because of that reason they are still using. But it's surprising to see that they are still with the old version.
Yeah, so the legacy systems point I think is relevant, but I'll let Stoyan comment on it rather than me.
For me, it's just surprising that if you count together the older versions of SCOM, like 2007, 2012 R2, and the other releases, that they're, let's say, below the expected number of legacy SCOM versions. But as Narul said, it could have a business justification. It could be that also some administrators follow the principle of never touch a running system. Not quite sure what's the case. For me, it's surprising. What is surprising is the low number of SCOM managed instance. But I really hope that next year maybe we'll see a different number there. That's the only thing I have to comment on.
The interesting thing about seeing this over time with the various version numbers is people that use SCOM don't move between versions quickly. It's not, there are some tools where you see much more greater adoption of new versions quickly. And so the number of SCOM MI deployments being low is not really that surprising. But we'll hold that thought for a second, because there are questions that are very relevant to it that we're going to cover at this point a bit later on. Also picking up on something that Christian said around the cost of SCOM MI. So just to sort of go a little bit deeper then, we've already kind of talked about this. There are a number of versions in here that have no support at all, mainstream or extended. And that's this sort of top grey bar. If I add together all the SCOM 2007 deployments, 2012 R2, 1801, 1807, that equates to 12% of this total. So there's no support at all. So as we've discussed, there may be justification for this in the form of people running legacy versions of Windows because they have legacy infrastructure needs. I'm thinking back to former lives, seeing banks running some critical, irreplaceable, antique application on old versions of Windows, that kind of use case. I'm sure there's some of these folk who are just, where it's just a case of it's not broken, why would I change it? But this is sort of obviously potentially a security risk as well. It's just not having support. Then we have the block in the middle where there is support, but it's extended support only. And here we're talking essentially about SCOM 2016 and SCOM 2019, where you have these, you still have extended support. Now, not everyone in this bar here is going to have extended support, but this is basically the majority of people. So I would hope, fingers crossed, that the majority of SCOM deployments do have extended support for obvious reasons. I'm just going to pause here and see if my panel have any thoughts on any of that stuff that we haven't already shared. In no particular order, we'll shout at once if you want.
Well, we have to keep in mind that we actually, alongside Windows Server support, and everybody who knows, like moving from Windows Server version 2016 to a new version, it means like quite a lot of work sometimes, because eventually the application doesn't support it, or you have to go for different stages to get it approved, and then something doesn't work and you have to go back. So, and I think through that, as we are part of Windows Server, the same goes a bit also to System Center, because actually the update is easier than a Windows Server upgrade, I would say, at least in most cases. So if you leave the database outside in the Windows Server itself, but it might basically feed into this a bit as well. And we see still a lot on 2019. We have plans to go to 2022, but because the server isn't ready, or like the underlying Windows Server or the SQL Server part, so that holds that often a little bit back.
Makes sense. I always think of SCOM Bob's upgrade tree for every SCOM-a-thon. When I think of this, it's a sliding tile puzzle, essentially. Stoyan Nurul, would you care to comment, anything to say, anything to add?
For me, it's just interesting how customers are handling older or legacy conversions because of the support, but since they have it already, most probably, like I said, they are monitoring a small number of special systems or older systems, so they most probably don't require that much of support. So that's the only thing I can add here.
I hope that's the case. I guess I should probably ask the question to that effect next year to get the answer. Nurul, anything to add?
I think pretty much I agree with what Christian and Stoyan just mentioned.
All right. In which case, then I will push on. So the other sort of important piece of this bar is where mainstream support exists. So we're looking at SCOM 2022, SCOM MI as well, which is obviously evergreen, and SCOM 2025. So I wrote the dates in here before we got yesterday's launch blog. So they're not exact, but you get the idea. It's the usual 10 years of support. I've just wound on from finger in the air guess at a release date, but you get the idea. And as we have no SCOM 2025 deployments, this bottom block is effectively the rest, and that is 39%, which is good to see, good and healthy. So let's move on to the next question, which is how many management groups do you have in your SCOM landscape? Now, there are a few interesting points here. We see the number of customers that have only a single management group, or potentially zero. Yes, we have had people fill in the Big SCOM survey without any management groups at all. I don't know why, but it happens. And so I have to say 0 to 1 rather than just 1, but there we are. And what we're seeing is a trend to more management groups, which I think probably, as a straight up guess, speaks to everything we've kind of already talked about here, with the multiple management groups being required to support different types of infrastructure, also potentially security. Thoughts on my panel? Let's start with Nurul this time on this one.
Again, here it depends. Like people have multiple versions of SCOM, so that could be one of the reason why there are many management groups. But yes, it's a best practice to have one management group for production and development and test.
Yeah. So that I thought it was only just literally occurring based on what you've just said is we didn't actually ask in production. So this will include dev, and I've got this summarized as percentage. I haven't actually on the slides exposed the raw counts, because it'd be interesting to compare that to the version by the counts by versions essentially. So dev and test probably are accounted for in here. Yeah. Christian, would you like to go next?
Yes. Well, the main reason, which is very logical besides the staging approach, is that if you have like a secure environment, and we know security is on everybody's top list. If you talk to a CIO, IT manager, secure is way up there. So we have seen the tier or like a level approach that, for example, if you monitor your AD, you create like a separate management group, like a tier 0 type approach. And that's really been driven now. Take out, well, we know if you know SCOM, right, and you're a SCOM admin and you deploy an agent on your ID, you're a quite powerful person, basically. So, but that's been separated now. So for customers, we also give that actual recommendation to split this into different management groups depending on your security zone. And that's, I think, one main point driving that.
Makes sense. Agreed. Stoyan, anything to add?
Yes, I first of all fully agree with Christian This was also the case for me this year. I had increased number of tiered, separated SCOM environments. So this was a big topic. The other thing is we saw at the beginning that more and more SCOM administrators and also monitoring engineers are giving responses. So we would expect from this group of people to administer multiple management groups, not only one. This is also a factor, but being one, I give my response every year also to the SCOM survey, and I can tell you my point of view. The one thing is with what Christian mentioned, is with steering and security and separate management group. The second thing is many of the SCOM administrators or consultants, they are migrating from, let's say, side by side, SCOM 2016 to SCOM 2019 on 2022. This includes 2 management groups. So considering this, it might be also a result of this. I think true. More or less is nothing surprising, but for me, it's also a positive trend.
Yeah, completely agree. Definitely a positive trend. Haven't considered the migration point either. Interesting. No, all good. Moving on, more in the same direction, how many management servers do you have in your SCOM landscape? Yes, there are some people that say they have 0, which is always interesting. Why fill in the Big SCOM Survey if you don't have SCOM? I don't know. Nonetheless, there are still some zeros. The most interesting point for me here is this, really. The drop in the number of customers.
Bruce, if I may interrupt you, quick question to you. If you have SCOM MI, do you have a management server?
Well, yes, you do. You don't necessarily manage it. Oh, we've got a meta.
Well, who owns it? Yeah, but anyway,
that is a good point.
Yeah.
I could make that clear in the way I phrase the answers next year. Because I would argue yes, but it's sort of an irrelevancy, isn't it? I think maybe next year I will include an answer to that effect. Yeah, good point. Where was I going with this? Well, basically the inverse of smaller numbers of management servers. We have more customers growing the number of management servers, which I guess isn't really that surprising because the number of management groups is also growing. So those are my views. Stoyan, what do you think?
I actually find a big meaning here. It's also, as you said, related to the previous data. We saw increased number of management groups. Maybe security tiering, separation of management group. And as you know, when you build up a management group, then in most cases you strive for redundancy. So it means a minimum of 2 management servers, etc., which actually leads to the fact that there is an increased number of management servers. And again, I fully agree with Christian, 0 management servers. It might be just the point of view of the one who gave the survey, having a SCOM managed instance and not being, let's say, responsible for the infrastructure there.
I will include an answer to capture that, but that doesn't explain the 2022 percentage of people. That's
really the case. That's really the case.
Christian, Narul, anything to add? Any extra thoughts?
Nothing.
So I have one point, because why are there more management servers? We have seen that over time, the monitoring extends into application monitoring. So they typically start with infrastructure monitoring. At one point, they add like a database monitoring, especially SQL Server. If you know the SQL Server management pack and you're adding more SQL servers, that's quite heavy on the infrastructure, actually. This collects a lot of data, requires a lot of data. So in that case, at one point, you need to add additional management server to load balance into your management group and create resource pools, basically, to spread it, especially if you have non-Windows workloads like Linux systems on that, which are more heavy on the system. So, and then they basically just deploy an additional set of management servers for those workloads, which perfectly makes sense to isolate that. As well, if you have like synthetic transaction, like the ULGNI, if you know it, like for synthetic monitoring, which is quite heavy actually, because it runs a lot of workflows, and you might want to have that on a separate management server. So that's one point actually why we see server being added.
All makes sense. It's worth bearing in mind the point you made about application monitoring, because that features later on in the answers to some further questions later down the line, but all sensible, all agree. Moving on, how many SCOM agents do you have in your SCOM landscape? So no surprises based on the last two slides, but fewer SCOM deployments or companies rather, because this isn't like specific on a per management group basis, have fewer agents, and there's a growth in the large number of agents. I think I have no additional comments on what we've already discussed. Let's see if my panel do before moving on. Silence. I'm good to go.
Well, I have a comment on this way because it has to do probably also with cost, because now we have like more powerful cores, and they're typically licensed per core. So we actually don't necessarily need to purchase more license to manage more agents. And we obviously get more systems, especially if you're doing like monitoring of a Docker stack or like container monitoring, right? So you eventually deploy agents to more systems or even to cloud systems, and but you still work with the same cost. So they're eventually not looking at more cost here. So we basically see either like, and that explains also the first two columns, I'd say, because either you decide for SCOM and roll it out more deeply, or you actually put things to another monitoring product.
Makes sense. I had not considered costs and changes in hardware over time. Cool, makes sense. Any thoughts, rest of my panel? And if not, I will move on to where is SCOM hosted? Management servers and databases. Now, this isn't. I was expecting, what with SCOM-MI's introduction, that we'd see the cloud percentage grow, but really, I mean, based on 2021, 2022, it's all still quite small. It's all fairly marginal. So for me, this isn't particularly insightful an answer to a question, but my panel may think otherwise. So I would expect to see, obviously, cloud grow over time, but that's not what we're yet seeing as far as where people are deploying SCOM. Panel, thoughts?
As I saw first the slide, I was thinking about the cloud deployments, whether it's really what is actually meant with cloud deployment, whether this is a SCOM managed instance or really SCOM running inside virtual machines in the cloud. But as I said, Bruce, I would expect nothing else besides seeing this blue pile grow up over time. And for me, this is not a surprise.
Christian.
Yeah, cloud is a difficult term. So if you say hyperscaler, then it probably makes it clear. But you have a lot of hosted private clouds, which seem to a SCOM sometimes like a hyperscaler, because it might be in a cage somewhere sitting at somewhere. Is it a cloud or not? Is it your own cloud? It's a rental? You don't know actually. So I think it's gives you some options to see that from an answer perspective. So because it's sometimes irrelevant where it runs as long as it's fast and in your perimeter of access. So but running it at a hyperscaler, or if you have a SQL managed instance in there, obviously is a different story. So but I think most think it's like cloud would be like on a hyperscaler here to look at the answers.
Makes sense. Haven't considered that. I don't really want to fiddle with the answers to the questions though, because I won't get the nice trends over time, but maybe I will. Narul, any additional thoughts or comments?
Yep, the fact that there's a reduced number of on-premises now, that is something I expected, but what I also expected is more number of people opting for cloud, which is going quite slow. So you need to see how it goes over next coming years.
It seems to me that a yearly pulse check is actually the right cadence to see changes. If we're to go any more frequent, you just wouldn't see changes, I don't think. I agree. Moving on then to the next question, which is what other tools do you use for monitoring? I could spend hours on this question. There's a lot of data here too, so bear with me when I try and unpack it a little piece. So the ones I've highlighted here, we've seen a slow and steady decline in percentage terms, at least over time. So we've got in here Azure Monitor, VMware, SolarWinds, Splunk, Nagios, and CloudWatch as well. But we also have got some growth in here in the form of Dynatrace, Zabbix, Datadog, Elk, and Prometheus. Now, for me, the big surprise is Prometheus, which is just sort of seemingly come from nowhere. It's still, not as high in sort of either numeric terms or percentage terms as the likes of, say, Azure Monitor. but it's interesting to see that growth. The other thing that's sort of noteworthy for me is the winners here are more kind of open source, with the exception of Datadog, which is very not open source and very not cheap as well. And the sort of losers being the sort of older tool stack, with the exception of CloudWatch and Azure Monitor, which is kind of interesting. Let's see what my panel think. And this time I'm going to go to Narul first. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so I see that people are trying to opt more for open source options. They could be especially smaller deployments. So this is especially for cost effectiveness is what that's what I think of. So because when we have small environments, so SCOM is useful when we have large. So that's with reference to the previous slides where we saw dip in small environments like management servers and management groups. That's what I'm trying to say here, is that people are opting more for open source.
It's really interesting. Open source takes you back to the first time I went to KubeCon, which was very the opposite of the world I'm used to from Microsoft, where rather than paying for the licenses, people pay for people, people's time effectively to keep open source tools running and configured exactly as each company wants. It's sort of like you either pay for licenses and off-the-shelf software, or you pay for people's time. But interesting points all the same. Soyan, would you like to go next?
Just so the comment of Thomas bot in the chat, or other tools can do some things better than SCOM. What I could say here, I think Thomas has a point. What I mean is, we all know how good SCOM is monitoring is with at Windows monitoring. But when it comes, for example, network devices or some other stuff, so Linux with agents is of course a nice addition of SCOM. But as we all know, there are also some, let's say, limitations there. So if I see the big picture, SCOM will be the preferred monitoring tool for monitoring Windows systems, and customers are trying just to find alternatives to fill in the gaps where SCOM isn't that good. So for me, Prometheus is not a surprise, because it's a good tool. Like Noru said, open source tools are a thing now. So I find it logical.
Rather than me comment, I'm going to ask Christian to go next.
Yes, I have a bit of a different view on this, because I think open source, if I talk to big enterprise customers, right? So those which have like 20,000 plus or 10,000 plus agents in there, they have a hard time with open source tools, I have to admit. So because it's just not ready for that. Take Prometheus, it's good at like Kubernetes monitoring and some of the number crunching with like high data, but honestly, if you want to do a alert chain with resolution and do like actions on that, like a recovery task, and that it will completely fail on that side. So and cost, I have seen for many points, cost is not really a point. SCOM is expensive and it's running since years. What I've more seen why people choose for open source, because we are talking about more like an on-premise world. And this also, I think, shows this, because if you look at VROPS, SolarWinds, Splunk, they're all not primarily on-prem. They have obviously a cloud part, but they're all like more Azure Monitor is the exception, but we can't talk about Azure Monitor separately, because obviously there are different opinions on that as well. But Datadog is also a typical on-premise tool. So, and the others as well. So I think those who change into the system really want to stay in control of the monitoring system. And that's obviously is a good reason to go for open source. Obviously, you get way more control eventually than you want to manage, because you have to pay for the people, because our SCOM admins, we have us, they are not developers. And well, you need those to maintain probably the open source environment and to make it suitable for your environment. But that's my view. So again, cost eventually is not really optional. Or Bruce, as you said correctly, cost shifts from license to people eventually.
That's certainly been my observation. One point I hadn't considered, so thinking of Prometheus specifically, is the workloads that people are using, are monitoring essentially. And now, Prometheus is obviously good for Kubernetes. Past incarnations of the Big SCOM survey, we had people asking effectively for Kubernetes management packs to be able to monitor K8s with SCOM, which is interesting. And it seems, I think, which is probably a good thing, that people are now more using the right tool for the right job. Prometheus is pretty good at monitoring Kubernetes clusters and pods and nodes. Better than SCOM is probably ever going to be. Yes, there are solutions out there, but there's definitely a point in there about that as well. I'm just going to quickly pause before we move on to the next question, because there's quite a lot of chat happening, which is worth highlighting. Comments around VMware instances dropping over the next couple of years. I wonder if Broadcom have got anything to do with that. Interesting point. There's some comments and questions around, can we expect improvements for SCOM? If I were only a SCOM product manager, I would be able to answer that. But you can all take a look at the announcement yesterday for SCOM 2025 to see what you can expect over until the next version. And it's not exactly a feature-rich release in my view. Azure Monitor seems to be gaining support from customers. I see alerting. I'm seeing the same thing, but it's slightly more nuanced than that in what I'm seeing. Maybe let's pause and discuss Azure Monitor.
Well, the point is, everyone basically has Azure Monitor. He has a subscription in cloud. So that's, if you're honest, if you're using Entra or anything like that, you have Azure Monitor. Why you can tick that box, right? But you're not actually using it for that type of monitoring we want to replace. So
it's true. There's depth of monitoring. It's true. It's true. Any other Azure Monitor thoughts? So I carry on reading the comments. If not, then we have Dynatrace and AppDynamics show interest of companies trying to get more of applications besides infrastructure. Yep, that is relevant in response to a later question as well. More people interested in monitoring their applications rather than just their infrastructure. This is sort of a maturity in monitoring and observability, which is good news. It's strange that Elasticsearch is missing from the list. Elasticsearch, if memory serves, as part of the ELK stack, so it's represented by this block here. So I think we're okay there. Let's see. Is ServiceNow's event management included in other? Hold that thought until I hit next on the slide deck, because the answer is sort of yes. Other is always quite high because people have always got a large list of tools, and ServiceNow is in this list. I don't think the people that submitted it specifically called out event management. I do believe ServiceNow is in this list. I'll let you scan the list of tools for yourself while I talk. The highest other response is CheckMK, which anecdotally is growing. Just sort of put this in proportion. 6 people said they use CheckMK, which represents 1% of the total. By contrast, Prometheus, 41 responses at 7%, just to give you some perspective on what this really means. There's a large list of tools that people are using. There's some things in here I've never heard of, and there's some things I have heard of I was not expecting to see ever again. There's all sorts in here. I'm just going to pause and see if there are any comments on my panel. Christian, would you like to start?
That's quite an amazing list if you look at what's out there. Obviously, being since 2020 doing this stuff, I have been HP OpenView. We developed stuff for that at that time, and SiteScope. I know quite a lot of this on this list. But if Grafana is really a monitoring tool, we can argue, I guess. So because it's more like the visualization part, right? So it's graph, yes, it's also there, right?
Same.
Yeah. So, but indeed, CheckMK we also see, and I guess it's going to take up, but it's actually just a branch of Nagios and Singa at an earlier stage. So we basically also have to see it under that, although it's not compatible with the checks from that are implemented in Nagios. But we actually I wrote a management pack to integrate CheckMK with SCOM. So anybody's interested.
Interesting. I do think there's something about regionality with CheckMK. It seems to come up quite a lot in Central Europe, more so than other places. But it is interesting.
It's a German company, so it's from Germany. Here it's quite used. I haven't seen it much outside, to be honest.
That would explain it. Didn't know that. Narul, would you like to go next?
Just one thought that there's Sentinel in RISE because we do have the in SCOM ACS, so I think people don't use that again because of a lot of resource and complexity. So
the interesting thing about
Sentinel is
Sentinel is, I mean, it is a monitoring tool, it is an observability tool, but I don't know if people would mentally think about it in the same breath as the likes of Azure Monitor and SCOM because of the security slant. Stoyan, thoughts, please.
For me, it's the CheckMK data is not a surprise. Like Christian mentioned, it's a German company which develops the tool, so it's also found here in Switzerland. Customers are using. I personally have a customer who is using CheckMK, so it's not surprising. A lot of the other names I really don't know, to be honest with you guys. Many of the tools I hear or read for the first time, but I think there is a lot more to monitoring tools than SCOM and Prometheus and of course the whole ecosystem.
Definitely. There's all sorts in that list. Absolutely all sorts. Really niche specialist tools and really old things and open source things, FluentD in there. There's all sorts in there. Interesting. Moving on, in the interest of time now, what tools do you see as critical to having visibility over your organization? Now, this isn't exactly the same question as what other monitoring tools do you use? Visibility versus monitoring, they're related, but they're not the same. Loads of answers for SCOM, not really that surprising. Squared Up is in the list as second, but essentially the thing that's most interesting to me about this list is how, when you compare the results to that question to the other monitoring tools question, you see some really interesting things. So for example, the likes of Azure Monitor, Splunk, and SolarWinds, loads of people have them in their tool stack. They do not see them as critical. Now, this could be just something in the way those questions are worded, and I would expect to see some different tools. I wouldn't necessarily expect to see, for example, Squared Up as a classed as a monitoring tool, same with Grafana or Power BI, whereas I would expect to see it feature in a question focused around visibility. Interesting. What do my panel think? Let's start with Stoyan this time.
So for me, it's not a surprise what I see here. Azure Monitor, I think it's considered critical only for certain aspects of monitoring, but definitely not for an on-premise infrastructure monitoring. And still, most of the customers, at least the customers we serve, they have infrastructure on-premise. So let's say the standard scenario. And the other tools are also Datadog, as we see here. Nagios was also heavily used. PRTG, it's not a surprise for me. Prometheus, like we already mentioned, so nothing surprising here to me. Of course, Squared Up, observability, I find it really nice, like an addition to SCOM, because we all know that SCOM isn't that good in visualizing and stuff, so logical.
Makes sense. Christian Stoyan, Christian Narul even, anything to add?
Yes, the fact that they consider SCOM as a critical tool, it is because it's been there for ages. It's so mature than all the other tools. So, and also it is flexible, right? So that's the reason why it has high number of users opting for it. And also how it is highly customizable. That's what I think.
It is true.
When we compare to other, Yeah.
Anything to add, Christian?
Well, probably not, but let's go on.
There is a matter of time. Let's move on. How do you expect your use of SCOM to change over the next year? For me, this one isn't particularly surprising or insightful, to be honest. The biggest thing to really highlight for me here is more people saying reduce now than before. It's not really that surprising. I expect this has got something to do with people's shifting patterns of what they're looking to monitor, and you're using if you're moving some of your workloads to cloud native tools, then you don't need as much SCOM. Kind of makes sense. But equally, there's still quite a large proportion of people saying they're looking to grow. We'll just look at the details here because we asked people, if you said reduce, why reduce? And there are a few things to sort of highlight here. Fewer people are looking to replace SCOM with Azure Monitor, which is sensible in my view. It's all about the right tool for the right job in my view. And weak cloud monitoring, again, is interesting to see. Again, that's possibly people using the right tool for the right job, or just not trying to move workloads from on-prem infrastructure type use cases to sort of cloud native. In the inverse of that, we see more people responding with SCOM features unclear and replacing SCOM with another tool. SCOM features unclear, I don't fully agree with. I mean, we've just had SCOM 2025, we've got SCOM MI, but the inverse of that answer is the whole, there isn't exactly a lot in SCOM 2025, sort of functionality wise. So that's my read on this answer. Panel, what do you think? Let's try and make this brief now, so we've got a time limit.
If I may start first, very quick, and replacing SCOM with Azure Monitor is, of course, not possible because they are just meant for something different. Of course, weak cloud monitoring, you could use Azure Monitor for cloud monitoring and SCOM for on-premise stuff. And what I just don't understand is SCOM features unclear. Actually, it's pretty clear how SCOM moves on, so it should not be a factor here. And the only thing I see here interesting is replacing SCOM with another tool, especially in the area of Windows monitoring. In my opinion, there are no tools which are better or can offer more than SCOM, so it's also surprising to me. That's my comment.
Okay, my comment is quickly what I said earlier. Cost is not an issue, and we see cost was in 2020 an issue, but today it's not anymore. Nobody is removing SCOM to cost. So they expect that monitoring does not come for free, and that is reflected here as well. Yeah,
no disagreement from me there. All right, moving on in the interest of time to the inverse of that question. So if you said grow, why did you say grow? No real surprise as to why. The interesting thing is few people are saying they're going to be doing less depth as far as their SCOM monitoring is concerned, but more people picking up on the application monitoring trend, which has been a thread throughout today's coffee break, more people looking to do more application monitoring. Any thoughts to my panel in no particular order? If not, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is how long do you expect to continue using SCOM? Not really that much change in the answer to this question. So most folk who are saying they're going to reduce their use of SCOM are still planning to use SCOM for a very long period of time. Even the 5+ years category is, near 50%. So it does see a dip from previous years, only a slight dip, which is interesting. Any comments on this one?
I think here the only thing what I can add is what I said previously is that the future of SCOM is not uncertain, so people are relying in future on SCOM. They know when the new version of Windows comes, they will have the new version of SCOM. So I think this reflects the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone else? If not, moving on to what other system center products does your company use? So we only have 2 years worth of data for this because I introduced this question in 2022. No real big swings here, not really that surprising. I don't think this is particularly insightful in the end, except for the obvious in that most people use Config Manager in addition to SCOM, but not everyone. The thing that, if I had more time, would be interesting to know is what people don't use Config Manager but do use some other piece of the suite from this list. But hey, I haven't done the crunching, so I'm merely suggesting a potential thing that could be out there. Any comments to my panel? If not, moving on to, are you interested in SCOM managed instance? So this one's interesting for me. It seems that the number of people who don't know what it is reducing, which is good. But interestingly, there are still people that don't know what it is, which is interesting in itself. And so people are making their minds up and they're landing on either the yes or the no pile. And unsurprisingly, more people are landing on yes than no, because it's the place we're seeing in development essentially in SCOM right now. which is kind of my read on it. Comments to my panel? Any thoughts on this one? And if not, moving on to one of my favorite questions, which is basically, what do you guys think of SCOM? Which we've captured in a question which I worded on a scale of 1 to 10. How likely are you to recommend SCOM to a friend or colleague? This will drive effectively the NPS, or Net Promoter Score, which is effectively, do you guys love SCOM or hate SCOM? And we asked you to submit, as I said, the answers on a scale from 0 to 10. And if you submitted a 6 or lower, you were seen as a detractor. Then we have 7 or 8 as passive and attractors as 8 or 9. And this is kind of like calculated and equated to this scale from plus 100 to minus 100. With all that in mind, in 2020, which is the first time we asked this question, we had a great rating. People seemed to be quite happy with SCOM, with a score of 36, dropping slightly in 2021 to 31, dropping further in 2022, which is interesting, and slightly up in 2024. So the general trend here is sort of more negative, but still is good. I think that in general, this comes down to essentially people are happy with the job SCOM does for them. And the reason why things are slowly sort of moving downwards is the use cases, the applications of SCOM are not growing as people's other infrastructure and application requirements are growing. But that's just my view. Panel, what do you think? This is the last question, so we can take a moment on it.
So I think it's a fair part of this. So obviously the mileage might vary depending on who you are. And we have these commandments here. So obviously it also would reflect probably how much they like their job. I put out there here now, because if you work with a product you don't like, it's obviously at one point you're not going to like your job.
That's a good point.
So I think the more they like the product they work with. Obviously, SCOM is in the end, it's still part of the platform, right? You can do a lot of things with it. You can extend it in all directions. So, but it became more difficult, especially because we have lesser documentation. When I think like 10 years back, we had like an authoring guide. We had Microsoft providing like an authoring console, separate products for that. All that is not there anymore. So obviously that makes things hard to work with the product, which might affect this.
All true. Haven't considered how your views on a tool and your role are kind of tied, but totally relevant. Narul, any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, so like in SCOM 2025, there's been no much improvement, like you said. So if they focus on that, like container monitoring or things like that, enhanced application monitoring, I believe the score might increase over there a bit.
Certainly possible. Stoyan, any thoughts?
Actually, I fully agree with Nuru on this. I think it could be related to the fact that, we are all techies. When the new version comes out, we all want to know what's better, what's new. And in the past years, there are no really surprising new stuff, features or enhancements. And maybe it could be due to the disappointment of the users or administrators of SCOM that they're saying, okay, previously it was great, now it's good. Most probably because they're disappointed that there are no new features, although there are some minor improvements. You know how it is when the new version comes out, you're interested, okay, what I get new, what's the new thing, maybe AI stuff, maybe container monitoring or this and that. And this is not there currently. So it could be due to this fact. Otherwise, I cannot explain. I have no explanation for the numbers here.
I guess I have one additional insight. So I obviously have the raw data from this survey, and there was one of the questions, I forget which, where we stuck a text box in there for free-form comments, essentially, as to why you gave the answer you gave. And I think it may have been on SCOM MI or reduce or grow your SCOM use. But there were lots of people complaining essentially at having to use the old admin console. It just feels like a tired tool. Comments to that effect, but I didn't sort of crunch this. I haven't got any statistics to back up my musings. That's my additional thought. And that is the last question, which brings us more or less perfectly to time. So all that's left to say is join us next time on the 20th of November, where I'm going to be joined by Ali, who is from Topcore, and we're going to discuss the Linux agent, broadly the Linux agent actually, but then drilling into failed upgrades and what to do about them, which is the topic of this coffee break. And that's on the 20th of November. So please do go and find the link for this on scomathon.com and register for it. But you can also find, as of, in theory, 4 p.m, we scheduled the blog write-up of the Big SCOM survey to go live. So that should be there now as well. So you can have a look at everything we've just summarized to your heart's content. A 2-second plug for SquareUp, who is obviously the company that myself and Narul work for. We're a company of 2 products. We have Dashboard Server, which is best in breed for SCOM, transforming the lives of you guys as SCOM administrators for over 10 years. You can see that lovely SCOM console in the background there, brought to life with SquareUp. Rich and deep HTML5 dashboards. We also have a cloud product that brings together all of your tools into a single pane of glass. It's the 2-second plug for SquareUp. So all that's left to do is to see if there are any questions. I can see there's lots of discussion going on around the SCCM and companies' hesitance to use community solutions, which does make sense. Are there any other questions, comments from anyone, including my panel, before we wrap up? I'm hearing crickets, which I think means no. All right. So all that's left to do is to say thank you very much to all of you out there for attending today's coffee break webinar. I hope it's been useful. I do like doing the Big SCOM survey. There's always lots of meaty detail in this. We could have spent another hour on it, I'm sure. And thank you also to my panel, to Christian, to Stoyan and Narul. Thank you very much for joining me today and helping me unpack the insights from everyone. And of course, thank you to everyone out there who submitted and participated in the Big SCOM survey, which we will endeavour to run next year as well. Until next time, thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.